Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Everything Disc virtual showcase. Agility starts with developing EQ. Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about Carver Associates. We are an international management consulting firm with over 30 years of experience providing transformational learning and development, helping our clients change behaviors and improve culture. Quick little introduction on myself. My name is Ty Miller, and I am the COO of Carver Associates and also a consultant, facilitator, and coach to our clients. We have a jam-packed agenda on this on-demand webinar. And today we're going to take a closer look at a few things. First, the rising need for agile organizations in the world of modern work. From there, we'll take a look at the psychology of the agile worker and the very real connection between agility and emotional intelligence. Next, I'll introduce all of you to the new Everything Disc Agile EQ product, covering both some background and theory, along with a closer look at the learning experience by module. We're going to highlight some of the key objectives and topics throughout both the profile and the facilitation. And then at the very end, I'll share with each of you how you can get in touch with us for any questions. Let's start with the word agility, which is more than a buzzword in the workplace today. It's a requirement. And all of you know this. You're probably living this now. But before the events of 2020, it's likely that your organization has undergone some kind of transformation to support organizational agility. But why are we also eager to become more agile? Because before the events of 2020, the marketplace was and continues to be constantly reshaped by powerful macro forces. Things like sweeping globalization, rapidly advancing technology, unprecedented workplace diversity, and relentless competition. And then there are the very real human and economic game changers, such as COVID-19, utterly beyond our powers to predict, much less control. More and more, we all need to be primed to handle volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, also known as the VUCA environment. Today, thriving in the modern world of work demands it. Recently, the insights team at Wiley, the organization that developed Everything Disc, surveyed over 2,500 professionals trying to get a better handle on the need for agility. And what they found is that agility might actually be the key 21st century competency organizations are striving to develop. Here are a few statistics that came out of that survey. First, 90% of respondents, from individual contributors to the C-suite, said that agility is more important to their individual success than it was 5 years ago. Moreover, 95% of managers, directors, and executives said that agility, which is the ability to adapt quickly and easily, is more important to their organization's success now than it was 5 years ago. Increasingly, it seems organizations and people require agility to navigate the work world. I want to shift gears for a minute to make a distinction about agility in the world of modern work. I'm guessing that this is probably not news to you all. Many organizations are striving to become more nimble by making their structure, systems, and processes more agile. Things like flattening the organizational structure, introducing project management, or encouraging on-demand collaboration through whether that's through open office plans or the integration of social networking tools like Microsoft Teams. And this is all great, right? It's a great start. It really is. And these structural and systematic changes very much benefit organizational agility, but the reality is it's not enough. Organizations can't be agile without agile workers, agile people who are resilient, adaptable, and collaborative. People who can not only withstand rapid change they experience in each day, but somehow can also embrace it. But what does this really look like? What does an agile organization really mean for how people work and behave each day? To answer this question, we can learn a lot by looking at the psychology behind the agile worker. Said another way, how people must approach some of the macro trends I just mentioned to successfully navigate through them. Let's start with industry disruption. This macro trend has been gnawing at organizations for a while now. New competitors come in to an industry, often by way of new technological advancements, and can change the rules and expectations overnight. So when an organization is at risk of becoming irrelevant, what do you need from your workforce? You need people who can change direction quickly, communicate effectively, and push back even when faced with resistance. Then we have social emotional skills such as showing resolve, being receptive, or taking risks also become important. This next trend, shifting organizational structures from hierarchical to matrix, aiming to bring the decision-making power to the individuals and teams who are doing the work. While this is great for creating more agile organizations, it also increases the social and emotional demands of the workforce. Things like sharing decision-making power with colleagues, that's tricky. Being on multiple cross-functional teams, navigating ambiguous boundaries between my responsibility and that of others, requiring a lot more judgment and diplomacy than it has in the past. In this environment, the agile worker has to be effective at reaching out, being diplomatic in their communication while also being assertive. Finally, the evolving mix of workers. Everything from the gig economy to a wider range of generations and cultural backgrounds represented in the organization, requiring people to work effectively with many more people, despite how long they've known each other. And while nobody is going to be able to keep track of all the different norms and backgrounds that would make for ideal interactions, there are some core skills that can really help. The agile worker needs to have these social and emotional skills to understand when to empathize, when to step back from biases and challenge their assumptions, when to push back and stand up for themselves. What these examples demonstrate is this: building an agile organization starts with developing the emotional intelligence of your workforce, of the people who drive your organization forward each day. This is the driving insight behind everything DISC Agile EQ, which I'll introduce to all of you in a minute. But before I do, this insight is something that many of the leaders surveyed in Wiley's research agreed with. In fact, 97% of managers, directors, and executives agree that developing emotional intelligence is crucial to building an agile workforce. This is why we are so excited to introduce Everything DISC Agile EQ. Everything DISC Agile EQ is an assessment-based learning experience that was designed to teach the participants to read the emotional and interpersonal needs of a situation and respond accordingly. This product combines the personalized insights of DISC with active emotional intelligence development to help participants learn to stretch and navigate outside their behavioral comfort zone, empowering them to meet the demands of any situation, which you saw from my very brief set of examples can be quite vast, even in a single day. Let's take a look at the introductory video for this learning session.
We all have abilities that come naturally to us. Certain skills or mindsets that are so second nature, so effortless, using them feels like riding a bike. For Ava, that's keeping her cool when everyone around her is stressing out. Or setting aside her own preferences long enough to really consider other points of view. Those are both kinds of emotional intelligence, but they aren't the only ones. Because the truth is, there are many different ways to be good at handling emotional and social situations. And people have different natural strengths. So, what are yours? That's where Agile EQ comes in. Using a tool called Everything DISC, Agile EQ provides a simple way to understand yourself and the kinds of emotional intelligence that may come naturally to you. Everything DISC describes 4 main styles. People with a D or dominant style are typically direct and firm. Their emotional intelligence really shines when they need to project confidence and persuade others. And they're usually good at speaking up for themselves. Those with an I or influence style are generally outgoing and enthusiastic. They're naturals at making connections wherever they go. And they tap into the energy in a room by paying attention to how people are feeling. People with an S or steadiness style are usually even-tempered and accommodating. They often excel at understanding where other people are coming from, and their calm, flexible approach helps keep conversations harmonious and collaborative. And finally, those with a C or conscientiousness style are typically analytical and reserved. Their EQ strengths involve stepping back and separating facts from their personal feelings, and they're often good at showing restraint, even in tense situations. You might have one of these styles or a blend of two, like Ava, whose SC style means she has a combination of S and C traits. The strengths associated with that part of the DISC map are probably easiest and most natural for her. But what about when Ava needs to, say, network with strangers or confront a coworker about a problem? In situations like these, she may have to reach for skills that don't come as naturally. And if she can't do that or doesn't think to try, that can create problems for her. Because sometimes our instinctive patterns don't work and actually end up boxing us in. Drawing on the principles of emotional intelligence, Agile EQ helps us discover our natural tendencies and recognize when to move beyond those familiar patterns. And that's what allows us to act, adapting to whatever situation we're facing. And that ability to adapt, to reach for a wider variety of responses, it's called agility. It's about stretching beyond our comfort zones when what's instinctive for us isn't enough. It means developing the flexibility to respond to different situations with the best possible approach, not just the one that's easiest. And really, the more agile we are in our responses, the more emotionally intelligent we become. And that empowers us to achieve things we never believed were possible, to enrich our relationships, and even to engage with the world in a new way.
Said simply, the promise of everything DISC Agile EQ is twofold. For learners, everything DISC Agile EQ helps them better handle the interpersonal and emotionally charged situations that they encounter each day. For organizations, everything DISC Agile EQ helps to develop the emotional intelligence of your workforce necessary to support a thriving Agile culture. Why we believe we can authentically promise this to you is because of three things. First and foremost, everything DISC Agile EQ is built on the foundation of DISC and is grounded in the proven everything DISC assessment. The specific Agile EQ assessment builds on over 40 years of DISC research and expertise, and it asks participants to respond to behavioral statements on a 5-point scale, including EQ-specific questions to help determine the participants' instinctive EQ strengths and opportunities. The assessment incorporates the latest computer adaptive testing methodology to ensure each participant receives precise insights to personalize their experience. This level of personalization creates aha moments that inspire true behavior change. Number two is active EQ development. You all know this, but there is a vibrant industry around the training of emotional intelligence. Many of these solutions revolve around an EQ appraisal, which gives an individual a measure of their emotional intelligence at a moment in time. But it's one thing to have insight into your emotional intelligence. It's another to use that information to grow and enhance your impact at work. And it's still another to scale it across the enterprise to drive organizational performance. Everything DISC Agile EQ was designed with this pragmatic developmental approach in mind. And it's this emphasis that distinguishes Agile EQ from other emotional intelligence approaches. Other programs provide participants with a numerical score, but often fail to clearly connect that score to what can be done to improve. Agile EQ participants not only know their individual EQ strengths, but also where they can improve, why it matters that they improve, and precisely what steps they can take to improve. Finally, the Everything DISC Agile EQ learning experience is powered by Carver Associates. We are experts in tailoring the Everything DISC experiences to the needs and circumstances of your organization, and we are empowered to bring this new application to life in a way that best addresses the needs of your organization and your workforce. Okay, let's jump right into some background and theory supporting Everything DISC Agile EQ. I actually want to start with this question. What is emotional intelligence? Because emotional intelligence, or EQ, has been around for a long time. In fact, since the mid-60s. And there are a lot of EQ models out there. But when you see all of these different emotional intelligence models, it begs the question, which one is the right one, or at least the best one? And to us, it's very similar to selecting a leadership model. You can see here on my screen this sampling of leadership models. We've got the leadership challenge and situational leadership or servant leadership. And when you look at all of these, the question becomes one of focus, right? What is the focus of each model? Is your focus descriptive or diagnostic or focused on change? Is your focus on uncovering traits, behaviors, or values? Where you choose to focus informs the model. And this is true for both leadership models and for emotional intelligence models. So when Wiley was deciding what model to use as a foundation of this experience, they considered prioritization and focus and landed with these three words: change, simplicity, and relevance. First and foremost, there's a strong need to offer a model that enables real-world change. That is the number one goal. How do we help people change their habits and behaviors? So this means that the model needed to be simple enough that people can carry it around in their head and have conversations about it. Because if it's not that simple, people aren't going to be able to draw it up in their heads when they find themselves in those very real charge situations that call for it, which, as we saw earlier, happen more and more frequently, especially now. Furthermore, it needed to be practical and relevant to the work people do on a daily basis. They need to be able to quickly see themselves in it and their struggle in it. So you will see those three priorities come through as we unpack this experience. From our focus emerges our definition. What is emotional intelligence to everything DISC? And one of the many assumptions that DISC carries into an organization is that there is no one right way to be. No DISC style is better than another. And similarly, with emotional intelligence, we're used to talking about it as if you're either high or low. It's like there's a single continuum where some people are poised, mature, and socially competent on one end, and people on the other end are awkward or socially oblivious. Or maybe you're somewhere in the middle. But the reality is, there are many aspects of emotional intelligence, and you can be very emotionally intelligent in one aspect, like remaining composed under pressure, but be very stagnated in another, like demonstrating empathy. So one of the things that everything DISC brings to this broader EQ conversation is the understanding that we all have things that we do well in the emotional intelligence arena. And for most of us, there are also things we can be better at to be more successful in our relationships and emotional management. So this is an operating definition of emotional intelligence in the Agile EQ learning experience. But if you strip the definition down to its essence, it's this: the ability to adapt to the demands of a situation. Some of us are really good in situations that call for aggression, but not so good in situations that call for patience. Some of us are naturally good in situations that call for caution, but not so good in situations that call for venturing out. And as we've seen, the world is asking us more and more to be able to shift gears and handle these different situations with equal competence. It's asking us to be more agile. So at its core, that's what we mean by agility: the ability to move quickly and easily. It's all about problem solving. With that definition in mind, I want to move on to the next topic in this section. The idea of stretch is something we've talked about for a long time within DISC, but until now, there just wasn't a formal program to guide people through how to stretch. But that really is, or this is what we're teaching here. We're helping this person with the DI style first recognize the need to stretch, then actually do it. To be more empathizing or more receptive or more composed when the situation calls for it. A common question we hear is, how does that differ from Everything DISC Workplace, which is another Everything DISC product? In Everything DISC Workplace, with that same person, that focus is helping them understand and adapt to the needs of the other person. So it might be understanding and adjusting to a very cautious person. The key distinction here, though, is that in workplace, we're not teaching them to be more cautious. Dealing with a cautious person is substantially different than actually ramping up your own ability to be cautious if it's completely out of your behavioral comfort zone. So in the end, Workplace helps a learner respond to the needs of another person versus Agile EQ helps that same learner respond to the needs of the situation. This last question I want to tackle within our background and theory discussion is this: what's being measured in the assessment? And it's this: a learner's comfort in stretching to a given EQ mindset. Mindsets are the words around the circle, and they're all elements of emotional intelligence, some of which come very naturally to a person, while others are quite unnatural and uncomfortable. In the case of the D style, their comfort in stretching to a mindset like empathy or receptivity or composure may be less comfortable than taking on a mindset of resolve or self-assurance or being dynamic. And the way Agile EQ illustrates a learner's comfort level with a given mindset is through an effort meter. And I wanted to give you a sense of how these are measured. First, everything DISC Agile EQ, as I said earlier, is an assessment-based learning experience. After a participant takes their DISC assessment, they're presented with a set of questions with this heading: how easy or difficult is it for you to do each of the following? And so if we're trying to measure someone's comfort with the composed mindset, a question looks like this: how easy or difficult is it for me to stop myself when I'm really angry from saying something I'll regret later? Or if we're measuring the receptive mindset, a question looks like this: how easy or difficult is it for me to remain receptive to other people's ideas when I have strong points to make? The effort meters are the output of these questions, and they offer another layer of personalization to the experience above and beyond a person's DISC style. For example, for one individual with a D style, it might not take a lot of effort to take on the receptive mindset. Where another individual with the same D style, it might take not much effort to take on the receptive mindset. So that is a brief look at some of the background and theory. We took a look at our definition of emotional intelligence, what we mean by Agile when it comes to emotional intelligence, and what the assessment measures. From here, I'd like to walk you through the learning experience itself, answering the question, what can your learners expect? For those of you who are less familiar with everything DISC, each of the learning experiences, including everything DISC Agile EQ, follows Wiley's transformational learning model, starting with a computer adaptive psychometric assessment. The results of that assessment are delivered to the learner through a personalized narrative style profile. And the profile is brought to life in a facilitation experience that engages and educates, creating aha moments that make behavior change possible. And finally, Wiley has created a suite of follow-up resources to inspire lasting behavior change. Let's start with the assessment. The Everything DISC Agile EQ assessment distills down to two sets of questions: core questions, which determine the DISC style, and Agile EQ questions, which determine the instinctive EQ mindsets. The core questions build on over 40 years of DISC research and knowledge and measure two central aspects of personality: pace and skepticism. Each of these questions asks participants to respond to behavioral statements on a 5-point scale. A few examples here include statements like, I am accommodating, or I am methodical, to which a participant selects the level of degree they agree with those statements. On top of the core questions, the Everything DISC Agile EQ assessment measures each learner's comfort with 8 EQ mindsets by indicating how easy or difficult it is to do each of the following behaviors. I shared a few examples in the background and theory section we just discussed, but here are a few more. Being forceful with my opinion during a group debate, or patiently listening to someone even if I don't think they know what they're talking about. Once the learner has completed the assessment, the results are reported in a personalized profile. The profile is then used in a facilitated learning process, which is generally a half a day, but can be adapted to meet the specific needs and time requirements of your organization. These two elements are used together to create personalized learning for each participant. And I'm going to step you through a high-level overview of what this experience looks like and how it works. Okay, so this is the structure of the experience, both the facilitation and profile. The first part of the experience helps learners discover their style and strengths. The report and facilitation provide insight into a learner's DISC style, as well as the EQ mindsets and needs that shape their interactions with others. The second part helps the learner recognize the value of other approaches. The report and facilitation reveal the other EQ mindsets that lie outside of the learner's comfort zone and demonstrate the value of stretching. The third part is about taking action to become agile. The learner gains insight and actionable strategies to start adopting the EQ mindsets outside their comfort zone and reach for the most effective response in each situation. Let's start with the first part, discover. In the first part of the learning experience, on the surface, what we're doing is a feel-good exercise to explore the learner's EQ strengths. But beneath that, in terms of the learning design, what we're doing is getting emotional buy-in and laying the groundwork for the rest of the experience. In the first module, the learner will first develop an understanding of Agile EQ. Number two, develop an understanding of their own DISC style. And third, learn about the Agile EQ mindsets, specifically those that come most naturally to them. So let's open up the personalized profile and start walking through this product page by page. Like other everything DISC experiences, one of the first things done in the Agile EQ profile on page 2 is grounding and level setting. We start off by ensuring that there is a common understanding of the term Agile EQ, which is defined in the profile here, as the ability to read the emotional and interpersonal needs of the situation and respond accordingly. Below this definition are the rest of the cornerstone principles, which if you have had experience with everything DISC learning experiences, this will be familiar. Cornerstone principles are designed to level set the experience, ensuring that the experience is respectful and positive for everyone. They also put the responsibility of the learning in the learner's hands by helping them see that their emotional intelligence is not fixed, that it can be developed, and that DISC can help them better understand the EQ mindsets that come naturally to them, as well as those that might be more of a stretch. The participants start to get familiar with the idea that learning to stretch to different mindsets gives them agility, and it helps them better adapt to the socially and emotionally charged situations. From there, the learner reviews the summary of the Agile EQ report and is introduced to the 3 modules: discover your EQ mindsets, recognize and value other mindsets, and act to become agile. Once we have people grounded in the cornerstone principles and the overall summary of the learning experience, then we introduce the DISC model and share that the Agile EQ report uses the learner's DISC style to support a deeper understanding of one's own EQ strengths and challenges. And also, what's really important, that no DISC style is more or less emotionally intelligent than another. We ground the learner in an overview of each style. The D or dominant style tends to be direct, strong-willed, and results-oriented. The I or influence style tends to be enthusiastic, optimistic, and lively. The S or steadiness style tends to be accommodating, patient, and humble. And finally, the C or conscientious style tends to be analytical, precise, and systematic. At this point, we turn our attention to the individual, and page 4 is where the personalized nature of the profile comes alive. The participant style is revealed, and in this example, we're seeing the IS style indicated by the blue box. The learner's DISC style is also indicated by their dot placement within the DISC map. You can see here that this learner's dot placement is located in the IS region. While the dot placement indicates the DISC style, it also indicates how strongly inclined that learner is to encompass the characteristics of their DISC style. A dot located toward the edge of the DISC map indicates a strong inclination, while a dot closer to the center is a more moderate inclination. With the grounding of the learner's DISC style, page 5 introduces the learner to the 8 Agile EQ mindsets, which are starting at the top and going clockwise. First, dynamic, influencing others and taking action on new ideas. Outgoing, building up relationships and expressing unfiltered thoughts. Empathizing, understanding others and reaching out to be supportive. Receptive, keeping an open mind and considering other perspectives. Composed, appearing calm and diplomatic. Objective, thinking rationally and clearly. Resolute, resisting pressure to cave in. Self-assurance, projecting confidence and taking charge. From here, the learner starts to dig into their own EQ mindsets, or their instinctive mindsets that shape their responses and interactions. The shading on the DISC map shows the mindsets the learner may adopt most frequently based on DISC style, also known as their comfort zone. For this IS style learner, their comfort zone includes the outgoing mindset, the empathizing mindset, and the receptive mindset. The profile introduces the learner to each of these mindsets, including some of the psychological needs that drive those behaviors. In this case, some of the needs that drive the empathizing mindset are a strong desire for connection and a need for acceptance. Beyond this, the learner gains insight into some of the benefits and potential challenges of their natural EQ mindsets. In the facilitated learning session, learners are asked to read and personalize these pages by placing a check mark next to the statements that ring true, X's next to the statements that don't quite feel right, and question marks next to the statements they aren't quite sure about. Typically, we see a lot of check marks, but it's important to help the learner own their own data. Page 8 of the profile is the learner's EQ snapshot. This is the first time that Wiley has used an infographic within a profile, and people really love this page. It can be a great takeaway, something to pin up at your desk just to remind you, hey, these are my EQ strengths, the things I'm really good at, the things I should be proud of. It reminds learners that there are aspects of emotional intelligence that are natural strengths for them. This section of the page outlines those psychological needs that drive the learner's instinctive mindsets. And the facilitation includes an exercise that helps people see how some of their greatest strengths are driven by these underlying needs. It offers some great aha moments for people, but also lays the groundwork for what they'll learn later on. That those same needs are exactly what makes it tough for them to stretch, even if they know intellectually that the situation calls for it. And finally, this infographic reminds learners of the effect they have on others, both positive and potentially negative. So both the page and the facilitated learning help build the foundation for each learner to generate their own insights later on. Okay, so this second section is helping people to realize that they could actually be more effective. Because with someone with the S style, it's easy to get in his bubble, to not really appreciate how much he could actually achieve if he was more tough-minded with his feedback, or if he opened himself up to more risk. So in part 2, recognize and value other mindsets. The learning experience is designed to open their minds up to the wide range of possibilities, to pull people out of their bubbles, to get them to consider, I could actually be resolute. I never really thought of myself that way, but why couldn't that be me? And then also in this module, we want to normalize and help people realize that the struggle they're having doesn't equal some developmental failure. The very structure of the model assumes that there will be some things they struggle with because everyone has something they struggle with. The learning objectives for part 2, therefore, help the learner do a few things. First, understand the need for and the value of other EQ mindsets. And second, understand the value of stretching to a less comfortable EQ mindset when the situation calls for it. In the second module of the guided facilitation, learners watch an introduction video that introduces the value of considering mindsets outside their EQ strengths. To bring this idea to life in the guided facilitation, participants prepare a small presentation on their most comfortable mindsets and teach others about its benefits. Now, for me, this was probably the most insightful part about the entire experience, both coming up with your presentation about your most comfortable EQ mindset, but then also hearing your peers describe EQ mindsets that are quite uncomfortable for you, yet a strength for them. Now, it's possible not all mindsets are covered by the group. So the facilitation includes an expert, basically a person who has that natural mindset and accompanying this style, describing the benefits of the mindset in a video format, which you'll get a chance to watch right now.
In some ways, emotional intelligence is really a kind of problem solving. Each time you face a challenging situation, your EQ can help you determine the best action to take. For example, here's Ava again. She's in a meeting, struggling to get a word in as her more outspoken colleagues dominate the conversation. She has questions and ideas to express, but she's not sure how to make that happen. So Ava does what she normally does. She waits for pauses, and when there are none, she pretty much keeps her thoughts to herself. So imagine how she feels a few days later, when her boss wants to know why the team hasn't thought through the exact issues Ava wanted to bring up. Let's rewind back to the meeting. What went wrong? Did Ava miss an opportunity? Because the truth is that she has lots of options right now. Like, she could ask the team to slow down so more voices can be heard, even if she has to interrupt someone else to do it. She could suggest the meeting organizer schedule more time. She could send out an email with her thoughts. There are many different ways for her to handle the situation. But of course, Ava's like most of us, which means there are a couple things that sometimes keep her from making the best possible choice. First, she probably doesn't actually see all those options. In fact, most of them never occur to her. And second, among the possibilities she does see, there are really only a couple that feel comfortable and familiar enough for her to really consider. And so, because she has unconsciously limited her choices like this, she doesn't handle the situation as effectively as she could. Developing your emotional intelligence allows you to do the opposite. It makes you agile. It opens your mind up to a wide variety of options. And then, just as importantly, it helps you push yourself to act on the best option, even if it's less comfortable. And here's where the mindsets come in. These are your options. Some of them are so natural for you that they become habits. They can be a source of strength, but they can also lock you in and limit your agility. For example, maybe it causes you to give someone a third and fourth chance when a tougher approach makes more sense, or to be assertive when really a gentle touch would be more effective. One of the most crucial steps in building your emotional intelligence, then, is learning to recognize the mindsets that fall outside your comfort zone and truly seeing the value, the flexibility, and the freedom they offer.
You can see from these videos that the learners start to recognize the range of possibilities they can call on in social and emotional situations, but also the value of doing it, of stretching to try something that feels totally uncomfortable. Let's dive back into the profile for a moment because pages 10 to 14 introduce the learner to their Agile Opportunities. These are the 5 EQ mindsets that fall outside of the learner's comfort zone. There is 1 page per EQ opportunity. And the learner first learns the definition of the mindset. So in this example, the composed mindset is reflecting before acting, moderating your responses, even under stress, and exercising diplomacy. Further down these pages, the learner sees the effort meter associated with the specific mindset. And you remember from our discussion earlier that these effort meters offer a level of granularity for the learner based on their assessment. They help the learner understand how much effort it will take to try on this EQ opportunity, not how well that learner used it today or the potential to use it in the future. For this learner, taking on the composed mindset is a moderate amount of effort. The last section on each of these pages helps open the learner's eyes to see why they might use this mindset. It's personalized to their style and EQ opportunities. So it almost feels like they have a coach customizing their advice of this mindset to their perspectives and values. It goes one step further to tell the learner when they might find this mindset helpful. An activity in the guided facilitation involves demonstrating mindsets in action and also involves more video of concrete demonstrations of what to do and what not to do. So the learner can really start to begin visualizing what stretching looks like and inspiring them on the need for change. By the end of the module, the goal is for them to commit to a mindset they want to get more comfortable with. So then that leaves us with module 3, which is probably the most straightforward module and also the most important because legitimate behavior change is really tough. We have these instincts and habits that have been grounded into us, and pushing back against them takes a lot of effort. And by our nature, our brain tries to save us the effort. It tries to take the easy route, even if that means we make choices that aren't so great for us in the long term. So in module 2, we talk about what to change. And in module 3, we explore how to change. The learning objectives for this module are twofold. First, explore the anticipated difficulties in stretching to new mindsets. and create an action plan for stretching to another mindset. Before I share some of the details of the personalized report, I want to share the introduction video of this module, as it explains what it takes to become more agile and why it isn't easy. It's about 2.5 minutes, so we'll be right back.
So how can you act? What does it really take to enhance your EQ? First, it's important to be ready for the resistance you may get from inside your own head. Think of it like this. In some ways, your mind is like a GPS, creating go-to routes, default responses that you take time and again until they become second nature. So if you deviate from them, there might be a voice inside your head saying that your new direction is wrong, trying to steer you back to the way you've always done things. Telling you, for example, that standing your ground with a coworker will damage your relationship. Or that giving a new idea the benefit of the doubt is just too risky. Often, that voice can be hard to ignore. After all, it's built on a lifetime of habits. But by putting those doubts into perspective, you can start stretching to new mindsets. It's okay if it feels uncomfortable or even a little scary. That's part of the process. Increasing your agility is all about small, manageable steps taken from a starting point that makes sense for you. Remember how Ava was having trouble speaking up in meetings? Expecting her to jump in and become a fearless debater overnight probably isn't realistic. Instead, she might start by looking for low-stakes chances to make her voice heard, maybe with people she trusts will really listen. Then, over time, and with practice, she'll become more comfortable speaking up, even in difficult situations. So, what does this mean for you? Above all, that developing your Agile EQ takes persistence. These kinds of changes don't happen all at once, but they can happen. You can become the person others look to for support, or the one who always keeps their cool, or the one who shares their ideas with confidence. All these destinations are within your reach. So, where do you want to go?
Developing EQ takes persistence. It takes effort to overcome old habits. And for that reason, on page 15, the learner is asked to select a single EQ opportunity they want to tackle. For this learner, we're going to choose the composed mindset. And while the learner only selects one during their guided facilitation, they have access to all 5 of their EQ opportunities. So this is the page someone would use if they decided they wanted to work on the composed mindset. Here, the learner recognizes that a good half of the battle is psychological, changing the way you're thinking. It's like we've got a GPS in our heads telling us how to reach our route, and we have to train ourselves to ignore those voices in our heads that are telling us to go with what's comfortable, and instead consciously choose to stretch. These pages arm people by helping them understand the struggle they'll face. For this specific example, if this IS style chooses to work on the composed mindset, you can put yourselves in their shoes and imagine yourself in a meeting where something went wrong with one of your projects. It was totally outside of your control, yet the team is detailing all the ways to avoid this happening again in the future. Someone working on the composed mindset might have a thought like this: this wasn't my fault. And you'll remember that earlier in the profile, we talked about how these thoughts might come up. Specifically, we talked about the psychological needs right here. These needs are really powerful and effective at pulling you back into old habits. You can imagine someone with a strong need for acceptance. Their brain is going to be telling them things like, I need to defend myself. It makes sense. They'll be thinking things like, I can't believe they care so little about my feelings. So the goal is to help the person anticipate the habitual thoughts that will stop them from stretching. We want to mentally prepare people for their own resistance their own brain is going to give them, and know that just because they're feeling uncomfortable, it's not a sign that they're doing it wrong. In fact, it might be the opposite, a sign that they're changing and that they're growing. It's something that they can be proud of. Then at the bottom of the page, we ask people to choose where they want to start. And the profile and the facilitated learning is designed to meet people where they're at. It's this idea of meeting people where they're at that makes the difficult work of stretching and becoming more agile possible. And you can see some baby steps we might take someone through who is trying to remain composed in a heated situation. In this instance, if the learner selects the intermediate starting point, we can see that some of their first steps include things like noticing early on when their attitude or composure is starting to deteriorate, or catching themselves when they are in a bad mood before it gets to the point where they shut down. The very next page of the profile provides some concrete tips for change depending where each learner is at in their journey. So to follow through on our same example, if this learner has selected the intermediate starting point, they are offered a few pragmatic strategies for becoming more agile when the situation calls for it. The learner can choose between them and take ownership over how they will take action. We are encouraging people to find something that they'll actually do. From there, the final page of the profile focuses on action planning, asking these types of questions. Why did you choose this mindset? Where will you start? Your biggest obstacle for completing this step, and how will you overcome it? Becoming more agile takes practice, and this action plan page is a tool the learner can keep nearby and refer to regularly. So that is a brief summary of the Agile EQ learning experience. Participants discover their EQ strengths, recognize their EQ opportunities, and act to become agile. Again, to help them develop the EQ necessary to navigate a wider range of social and emotionally charged situations they face each day at work. For ongoing learning to keep DISC alive, Wiley created a website called myeverythingdisc.com. Here, learners can connect to their coworkers, run comparison reports, and access DISC-style podcasts. If you'd like to see an overview of myeverythingdisc.com, you can head to our website, carverassociates.com, under the resources tab, and under on-demand webinars, you'll see an overview there. If you have any questions, please reach out to us with the contact info on the screen or through our contact form on our website. And with that, we want to say thank you for watching and have a great day.